What's going on, community? It is Pastor Brett with today's daily Bible reading. As always, you can opt in at our website, findcommunity.com/Bible reading, if you want this devotional video and the passages delivered in your inbox each morning. Today, as we continue our series through Mark, we're reading actually from a psalm that I think can give some vision and some clarity into what we will be reading and studying together this weekend. And I think if you are familiar with some of the ministry and the life and the activities of Jesus, you'll see these parallels really quick and really clearly. And the question I want to ask is, what do they tell us? Why do they matter? And so today's reading is from Psalm 107. Psalm 107. And Psalm 107, we're going to actually be in verse 23 and following, but I want to begin in verse 1. It says, "Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever." This is setting up the theme of the psalm. This psalm, it's a long psalm, Psalm 107, but it just tells all these ways that God has rescued his people, all the ways that his goodness has been seen, all the ways that he has delivered them. And so in verse 2, it says, "Let the redeemed of the Lord tell their story." And then we have the story of God's people coming back from war and his provision for them. We have God's people experiencing forgiveness of sin and freedom from the power of sin in their lives. And then in verse 23, there's another scene that's being painted. Here again, the people of God are telling about how God has provided and how God has acted in their experience. And so let's look at verse 23 through 32 to see this scene unfold of where we've seen God's goodness at work. We read, "Some went out on the sea in ships. They were merchants on the mighty waters. They saw the works of the Lord, his wonderful deeds in the deep. For he spoke and stirred up a tempest that lifted high the waves. They mounted up to the heavens and went down to the depths. In their peril, their courage melted away. They reeled and staggered like drunkards. They were at their wits' end. Then they cried to the Lord in their trouble, and he brought them out of their distress. He stilled the storm to a whisper, and the waves of the sea were hushed. They were glad when it grew calm, and he guided them to their desired haven. Let them give thanks to the Lord for his unfailing love and his wonderful deeds for mankind. Let them exalt him in the assembly of the people and praise him in the council of the elders." Again, what we have in this psalm are just a number of scenes in which we see God's mighty hand at work. And what do we have here? We have the story of some sailors who came across a mighty sea, big wind, strong waves. They were staggering around like drunkards, right? Things were just out of control, even though that they were experienced seamen, we would imagine, as they were merchants. They were out of their depths, and they cry out to the Lord. And what happens? He rescues them. Suddenly, the storm is but a whisper. The waves are hushed. A calm grew in that moment. First and foremost, there's two ways to look at the story. First, there is the context itself, right? Before Christian times and before the coming of Jesus, this psalm stood and stands strong as just a testimony to God standing in the gap, God intervening in our emergencies when we feel overwhelmed. Literally, when the waters are crashing over the boat, God is near and God is powerful even over these elements of nature. The seas in the ancient world could be a scary place. And in fact, in a lot of Hebrew poetry and literature, we hear them being spoken about as the abyss. Like it's just like this massive place where lives and property are lost. The ancient Hebrews had a deep, profound respect, even fear of the sea. God is bigger. That point stands in and of itself. But the other reason we read this psalm today is that in Mark chapter 4, one of our passages for this weekend, we see a scenario where Jesus calms the storm. And some of the same language that we read here in the Psalms is echoed in Mark's retelling of that story. That the sailors were overwhelmed, that they're at their wits' end, they're stumbling around like drunkards, they didn't know what to do, they thought they were going to die, and they cry out to Jesus, "Don't you care?" He comes and he stills the storm, and he tells it to hush, and suddenly it is quiet. Now, maybe it's a coincidence, but I don't think so. That's not the way scriptures tend to work. If there's a parallel like this, Jesus is most likely inserting himself in a sense into this psalm and letting us know that time when God hushed the seas and stilled the storms. That's me. I am doing that because I am God. I am sovereign over these things. The stories that you read about in Psalm 107, now you're seeing it in the flesh in me. I think there's a real identification with the hand of God and the work of Jesus. And that's what we see in this psalm as we read it side by side with Mark, which is one of our readings later this week. So you'll get a chance to compare and contrast and see that. But I think the big idea is that just as we understood in the Old Testament, even apart from Jesus, God is bigger than the storms. In Jesus, that truth has taken on flesh, and that truth has come and lived among us, and that truth ultimately has come to save us. So as we think about Jesus, as we think about seeking to follow Jesus, remember, he is greater. He is bigger. He is stronger and more powerful. He is sovereign over this world. And let us not imagine that he is far away from us in our problems. Let us not imagine that he doesn't care about what we're going through. That's not the picture we have here. We have a picture that in the storms of life, literally as the ship is being sunk, God's near and he cares. And it's up to us. We're being called here. The example to us is to call out that we might know and hear. All right, guys. God bless. Hope you have a great, great week. And look forward to diving in to our study together this week. All right. Bye.